What's up guys, Kudou here. So I'm working on something a bit special for you guys, but as some of you may know, I got a little sick on Sunday, so I couldn't really work on anything. I'm feeling a bit better now, and I wanted to get something small out for you guys, so I decided to go back and answer a pretty interesting question I got during one of my live streams. Specifically, somebody asked me about what my favorite combination of colors is in Magic the Gathering, and I proceeded to answer with this huge spiel about how I used to play Magic the Gathering, why my certain color combination is my favorite, and all this other kind of neat stuff, but nobody could hear it because my mic wasn't working properly. Say it with me, guys, it's not a Kudou live stream unless the audio is messed up. But here's the thing. So, my favorite Magic the Gathering deck of all time is a deck that I built when I started taking Magic the Gathering really seriously, I'd say maybe about 10-ish years ago. Don't know if it was exactly that long ago, but it was a pretty long time ago. And there are a lot of sort of gushy reasons as to why I like card games so much, and it all sort of started with this deck. I'd like to share with you my favorite deck of any card game that I've ever built, ever played with, and probably one of the most influential things I've almost ever done. I know that sounds really dramatic. I try not to use hyperbole too much, but in this case it's almost kinda true, but I know you guys don't want to hear about that. Let's actually talk about the deck. When I was about 7, our local Walmart ended up getting packs of this card game called Magic the Gathering. And the specific pack that I remember them getting in was something called Urza's Saga. And it was a pretty big deal back then, okay? People were buying up these packs, and I happened to get a hold of a couple of the booster packs. I think I asked my mums to buy them for me or whatever, and she didn't really understand what they were, so she ended up just buying them. Now keep in mind, at this point, I'm like a 7-year-old kid. I don't really understand what the rules are or anything. I end up getting this pretty neat little like tutorial computer CD from a yard sale or something, and that taught me how to play the rules basically. And I used to sit at the computer and like restart the tutorial and play it over and over again like 4, 5, 6 times a day. And then I finally get enough of these cards to share with my friends, and me and my friends sit around and we play this card game together. Now again, this is all taking place when I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old, and I end up just dropping the game altogether. I think this is about the time that I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! And then I just sort of let the game go. Fast forward a few years, my circle of friends has grown quite large, and I'm very happy with myself. A couple of my friends are into this card game called Magic the Gathering, which I just so happen to remember because I have a whole bunch of the old cards back home. Now, when we got back into this, a set called Shadowmoor was coming out. There was already a set before that, I think, that had something to do with like elementals. Morningtide, I think it was called. Morningtide? Was that it? Yeah, it was Morningtide, Shadowmoor, Eventide. I remember. So Morningtide's out already, Shadowmoor is coming out, and we all decide to pitch in and get into this card game together. Now, at this time, I've picked up an elemental starter deck and a few booster packs, and I've made myself a pretty nifty elemental deck, but it's pretty much just me working with what I have and trying my best to keep up with everybody else. It was decent, not great. Shadowmoor comes out, we get our fat packs, we get our booster boxes, we get all that stuff you used to buy as a kid. So Shadowmoor comes out, we get our fat packs, we get our booster boxes, you know, all that stuff you get when you get into a card game. And I happen upon this card with the effect Wither. And the effect of Wither, for those who don't know, is when this creature deals damage to another creature, it deals the damage as -1/-1 counters. Personally, I'm really excited about this. I think, holy cow, I have to make a deck around this. This sounds amazing. At the time, nobody would really listen to me about it, you know? Like, I talked to some people, some of like the older kids, some of the college kids and stuff, and they let me know that Wither was not that great of an effect, that you couldn't build a deck just around Wither, like creatures with Wither were cool, but you just couldn't build a deck around it. So, you know, I talked myself blue, and eventually I come up with something pretty close to what you see today. I know I've been talking for like 5 minutes and we haven't actually gotten onto the deck list, so I guess what we'll do next is we'll go onto the deck list, I'll explain how my deck works, and then I'll sort of get into some more personal background Kudou stuff. As always, if you're just hitting that the deck list, then you're a crazy person. You are insane. This deck is way too old to still be viable. I only keep it around because of sentimental value. Seriously, there's no reason to net deck this deck list. I'm being very serious. And all I ask is that you leave me a like on your way out. For the rest of us, we're going to learn exactly how this deck used to function. Ultimately, the deck revolves around this card here, Necro Skitter. It's a 3-cast, it has Wither, and whenever an opponent's creature goes to the discard pile with a -1/-1 counter on it, then I get to put it on my side of the field for free. Now this is a pretty amazing ability. All you have to do is figure out how to get one -1/-1 counter on one of your opponent's creatures, and if that creature goes to the discard pile for any reason, that is now your creature. This is a very important piece of a puzzle that I like to call the Skitty Lock. You know, to this day, I really haven't seen very many decks that utilize this sort of idea to its fullest capacity, but then again, there were a lot more powerful decks within the set. But today, we're talking about this one, so I'll explain how it works. A card was released called Power of Fire. Now, it's a creature enchantment, and the enchanted creature has the ability you can tap this creature to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Now, this wording is very important, and it's the entire reason that the deck functions. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now, the effect of Wither is this creature deals damage as -1/-1 counters. So, if you attach this to a creature, it can essentially put a -1/-1 counter on another creature. This leads to a lot of really interesting things. One of probably the most interesting things about Wither is Wither has the power to destroy a creature that's indestructible. Before you comment, we've spent 10 years rule checking, fact checking. We know for a fact this is true, and I'll explain how it works. Now, the effect of Wither does 2 checks. 1, it checks to see if the target is capable of receiving damage. Now, indestructible creatures are capable of receiving damage, it's just that invisible damage cannot kill them. Once the game has done a successful check to make sure that the target is capable of receiving the damage is converted from invisible damage into -1/-1 coins, and becomes a -1/-1 coin as soon as it hits play. From that point on, the -1/-1 coin acts as a -1/-1 coin as though it were dealt any other way, as though you played a card that just dealt it as a straight up -1/-1 coin. If the -1/-1 coin brings the creature's toughness down to 0 and it cannot be increased, then that creature is destroyed. It's pretty cool, right? Anyways, that's not important. So the idea is we get Power of Fire on Necro Skitter or another creature that is capable of dealing Wither damage. The final piece of the puzzle is Crumbling Ashes. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy target creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. And no, before you ask, I know for sure that this cannot destroy creatures with indestructible. Alright? Okay, before you point it out, I know this can't destroy a creature with indestructible. The last one was just an anecdote. So Crumbling Ashes, right? If you have Power of Fire on one of your Wither creatures, then during your opponent's end phase, like seriously as soon as they say I end my turn, you tap your creature, you put 1 -1/-1 counter on one of your opponent's creatures. At the beginning of your turn, you destroy that creature with Crumbling Ashes, and it comes into play on your side of the field. That is the basic idea of the Skitty Lock. The thing that makes this so interesting and potent is it makes your opponent afraid to play anything. You're guaranteed to take at least one creature from your opponent's side of the field every single turn. So every time they decide to play a creature, they have to deal with the fact that you're going to be taking one of the creatures that they play that turn. It was glorious. God, I can't wait to read all the comments. All the comments with the MtG nerds just going on and on about how they have the strategy to get around this, even though they're really just trying to outsmart like a 15 or 16-year-old. It's not really that impressive, guys. Please stop. But hey, we've got other creatures to help us out as well, like Una's Gate Warden. Una's Gate Warden is a great creature. 1 drop, flying, defender, Wither. You can put Power of Fire on it and it's like invincible. It's really great. This thing could pull off really cool stunts. Like, one of my favorites is if you send it out to block something and it has Power of Fire, then you can activate Power of Fire on top of blocking, and you can potentially deal either 3 damage to a creature, or you can deal 1 Wither damage to something before it dies, or you can just have it deal 1 damage to a player. Like, who cares? Flying increases the number of things it can defend against, and because it has Wither, it can potentially put 2 Wither counters on something. Our other Wither fanatic is Kulrith Knight. Kulrith Knight is seriously like one of the coolest cards in the deck. So here's how it works. It has Wither, of course, it's flying, it's a 3/3, And creatures your opponent controls with counters on them can't attack or block. Now keep in mind, it says counters. It doesn't say -1/-1 counters, it just says counters. So if your opponent's put +1/+1 counters on anything, if your opponent's got like, I don't know, some weird tokens that give their cards special abilities or something, if they have a counter of any kind, they cannot attack or block. Essentially, you can play Colrith Knight. Whenever you see something hit the field that you don't want to be relevant anymore, you power a fire, put a Wither token on it, boom. That creature cannot attack or block. This guy, man, this guy was a very hard guy to deal with, and that 3 damage really came in handy a lot. You fly over him, you hit him with a big dumb 3 damage every turn, it's just good times. Another fun little guy that works well with our strategy is Dusk Urchins. Dusk Urchins, whenever it attacks or blocks, it gets a -1/-1 counter, which obviously can be a problem for us, but when it's put into the discard pile from play, you can draw a card for every -1/-1 counter on it. So, what you could do is focus this with all of your -1/-1 counter hate, and this was essentially a draw engine. If you just sent it out to attack and block 3 times, then you got to draw 3 cards, which is cool. You could also target it with something we'll look at a little bit later and draw 5 cards off of it, and I'll explain that when we get to it. All in all, just a decent way to draw some cards and get some extra damage. This was the last little guy in the deck, and he wasn't quite as useful as the other cards, but by golly, he sure tried. When he comes into play, you can deal damage equal to your power to target creature or player, so it can either snipe something for 2 damage or just hit a player for 2 damage. You'd be surprised how helpful this guy was. Like, he came into play and he sniped like a Llanowar or just something that was really helping out your opponent and killed it, and it was just really simple. No Wither or anything, and that's kind of a shame, but you can play it, deal 2 damage, and when it dies, it comes back into play, deals 1 damage to something, and then dies again. Now, spells are very important for a deck like this, and none of them were more important than Scar. Scar is simple. Pay 1, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. This is great because it gets around things that can't normally take damage, not that that was very common. But if you have something like a Colrith Knight in play and your opponent plays a creature that you're not ready for, you scar it and now it can't attack or block. Or if you have Crumbling Ashes in play, you scar it and then you destroy it at the beginning of your upkeep. 1 mana, so handy. Puncture Bolt is the upgraded version of Scar. It deals 1 damage to a creature and then puts a -1/-1 counter on them. So it's essentially the same thing, but you're paying 1 extra mana to have it also deal 1 damage. So it deals mainly 2 damage to the creature. That's sort of its main use. It deals kind of like 1 damage to the creature normally, and then also a -1/-1 counter to the creature, so if it has 2 toughness, it's dead. Now, if you're dealing with something extra ornery and you just need to bring out the biggest firepower you got, you bring out the Puncture Blast. Puncture Blast deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and it deals it in the form of Wither. So either 3 Wither counters on something, or an opponent takes 3 damage to the face. And you would be surprised how many times that 3 damage to the face saved me in a match. The last spell of the deck is Incremental Blight. This is something of a big finale for the deck. Like, it's not something that always came out, but when it came out, it's because I was ready to make a big play, and I needed this in order to make it happen. First, you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature. Okay. Then you put 2 -1/-1 counters on another creature. Okay. Then you put 3 -1/-1 counters on a third creature. You essentially put 3 creatures out of commission with this card. It's great. It's so awesome because not only is it just laying the counters, so you don't really have to worry about things that aren't allowed to take damage, but it's also sort of marking 3 different targets. And if you play it correctly, like it destroys a creature and marks 2 others to death during your next turn. Just so many good uses. Even if it was just like put 1 -1/-1 counter on 3 different creatures, this card would still be worth running because it's just so nice to lock down so many cards at once. Now, at the time, I was just some poor dumb kid. I couldn't really afford like the pain lands and stuff, so we just ran good old-fashioned lands. We had some mountains, we had some swamps, and the one special land we had was Terramorphic Expanse. God, those were the days. Cards used to come and go all the time through the deck. One of the main cards that I really tried to make work was Midnight Banshee. It's got Wither, It's 5/5, which is really big. It only costs 6, which for the deck, it's already pretty cheap, so fitting this in wasn't that big of a deal. And at the beginning of my upkeep, I put a -1/-1 counter on every non-black creature. This effect is great, especially because none of the creatures in my deck are non-black creatures, so it doesn't hit me at all. The only reason I didn't find a way to tech some of these in, maybe at 1 or 2, is because in my area, everybody sort of played some black creatures and it wasn't that useful. And that's the only reason. If I went back and played the deck in a sort of more open area, I probably would have put some of these in. Scrapper was a decent tech for a while, but I mean, it's just a 1/1 with Wither. As decent as that could be, I really prefer Una's Gate Warden. Like, there's really nothing this can do that Una's Gate Warden just didn't do for me better. Bogart Ramgang was in there for quite a while, but I ended up taking this out too. It's nice because it's 3 damage with haste, but I just found that it wasn't quite fast enough for what I needed it to be, as weird as that sounds. Like, honestly, if I were to go back and remake the deck, I think I might actually try to fit some of these in. Maybe take out like 1 land and maybe like a Murderous Red Cap and put a couple of these in, because they're pretty cool dudes. Pretty cool dudes. One of the other things that sort of hurts this is the fact that it costs 3 red specific mana, and honestly, I just didn't have any pain lands or anything, so if I went back and actually put some decent lands in the deck, then I'd probably find a way to fit this in. So I hope you can see why I like the deck so much and why I was so proud of it when I was younger. Like, it did well. It did really, really well. Every time my opponents played creatures, I'd scar them. Crumbling Ashes, Necro Skitter, bring it back on my side of the field. I'd taunt them a little bit about how cool their creature was that I got to play with. It was good times. Honestly, I still enjoy playing this deck to this day, even though I know it's really outdated. And no, don't you come to me with this stupid Infect bullcrap. Infect is such a stupid ability. People are going to say, oh, why is it a stupid ability? It's pretty much the exact same thing, but better because it poisons players. And that's exactly it. Like, with Wither, it didn't do anything special to players. So if you wanted to play a Wither deck, you had to be kind of smart about it. Okay? You had to be kind of sneaky. You had to be able to control your opponent's field. You had to really time your moves and stuff. And it was great. With Infect, because you can deal poison damage to players, you attack with like a 1/1, and your opponent says, I don't block. And you say, oh, okay, I played 3 giant growths. You take 10 poison damage. GG. I'm not into it, dudes. If you're into it, that's fine, my dude. That's fine. But you have to admit at the least, that Wither took a little bit more smarts to play. I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be mean, but like, Wither, dude. Wither. You had to think pretty hard to make a Wither deck work back then. So that's pretty much it for the deck. I'm pretty much just going to go into like some Kudou story time now for anybody out there who cares. So this deck is very special to me. It was one of the first times I really remember. This is going to sound really cheesy and it's going to sound really awful, but this is one of the first times I really remember being heard by somebody. Because back when this came out, Shadowmoor was out, Eventide was coming out, and I remember all of these people telling me over and over again, like, how this couldn't work. You can't just build a pure Wither deck, it's not strong enough. Look at all of these other better decks in the meta. It's never going to stand on its own. And I remember just being so... It's really hard to describe. It's irritating. It's irritating when you feel like you have good ideas and nobody will really hear you out or listen to what you have to say. So, on my own, by myself, I went out and I found a way to make the deck work. And I stumbled a bit at first. I didn't have a perfect build first off, of course. I made mistakes, but in the end, I came out with this deck that nobody expected, that just came out and blew everybody away. And like, when I say it blew everybody away, I'm not saying that it was like the absolute best deck that anybody had ever seen, but let me tell you something. It was one of the decks to beat back in the day. Like, I don't want to brag or anything, but considering exactly what the deck went through, I got a little bit of bragging rights, okay? It was pretty fun back in the day. But again, it's not about the deck being good. Like, honestly, any deck would have been good. I could have come out with so many better decks, but it's the fact that I really believed in this idea, and I found a way to make it come out and be something just really real. And again, I'm gonna just add more cheese, man. I hope you guys wanted that extra cheese because you're about to get it. To me, it sort of exemplifies what I love so much about card games. For me, card games are like having a conversation with the other person. I feel like when you're in a duel with somebody, it's one of those times where you can really truly understand each other through playing your cards. Like, you see so many different mindsets, so many different metagames. Like, it's when somebody's building their deck, they're trying to get sort of a point across, and it's a point that they believe to be better than everybody else's point, and then when you play against them, you're sort of creating like this series of arguments against each other until one of you comes on top. And it's just, in that moment, I feel like I'm really being understood. Whether I win the game or I lose the game, I enjoy card games because I like having my voice heard in that way. Like, I've never really been a very, I guess you could say, extroverted person. I don't really talk to very many people, and honestly, when I do talk to people, I stumble a bit. I stutter a bit, sometimes I forget what word I want to say, and I sound sort of like a mess when I'm trying to talk. But with card games, there's no stuttering, no stumbling, there's none of that social awkwardness that you have to deal with. It's just, this is what I think is a good idea, and then your opponent brings out what they think is a good idea. You play the game, you come up with your strategies, and like, you really get the chance to express yourself in a way that sometimes you don't really get to with words. It's also one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about making stuff happen out of nothing, and that's I'm just, my social awkwardness is coming through here. Maybe I should have built a deck around what I wanted to say. So it's something that I really enjoy doing for people, is when they have some kind of deck idea or something that they really want to make happen. Like, I remember what it was like to be told that something was garbage because the meta told you that that wasn't a good idea, or like when you're really trying to make something work and it's frustrating because you feel like in the back of your head, you feel like it's a good idea and you feel like there's a way that you could make it work, but because we sort of hit this age of nerdom where like the winner is the right one and there's really nobody else, you hear all of these people at card game tournaments and stuff like just completely put these people down, and it hurts a bit, you know, because I was there. I was that person trying to get an idea across, and it wasn't working for me. And obviously, like, I've had more experiences since the days of the Wither deck, okay? So I don't bring everything just back to the Wither deck, but it was the starting point from my point of view. One of the reasons for me starting the YouTube channel was because I wanted to teach people things. Like, I understand that it's really easy to just have somebody make you, like, a meta deck, and then you play that meta deck and you do well, and you don't really understand like the basics of the game or anything, but you know that you do really well with this deck, so it's fine. But when people are playing card games, I want them to be able to express themselves in the best way possible. And I think that the best way to do that is for people to understand not just things about the cards that they're playing, but things about the game that they're playing. Like, these are all of the rules and limitations that are set ahead of you, and here's how you can push them. You don't have to do this and this. In fact, if other people are doing this and this, here are some ways to go against that. It's not really that valuable to me to just go over like what the absolute best cards in a card game are, because for me, I think it's more important to understand what the best goals of a card game are, or what the best ideas are in a card game, or what the best types of advantages you can gain in a card game are, because then you can find things that really sort of come in tune with what it is you want out of the card game. And honestly, playing something that you're comfortable with is always going to yield better results than playing something that you just know is good that you don't really understand that well. I know I've sort of made the air really awkward with my whole card games or sort of my form of expression thing, but I feel like it's important to understand who I am and what this is as a channel. For me, what I do is important not because like I want people to go out and win more card games. It's really not that important. Honestly, I think everybody knows by this point, if all you're looking for is like to learn how to win at card games, there's probably way better channels out there than mine. But for me, I just want people to understand the games. And in doing so, I want people to understand each other. And I think in order to really understand what my channel is and who I am as a person, then that's something that you need to understand about me. And I know this is something really stupid that YouTubers do, but I actually do have a question for you at the end of this video. What is your Wither deck? Like, really think back for a second to a card game that you enjoyed, that you really love to play, or that you might even love to play today. Like, just, I want to hear about everybody's one experience with a deck that just really solidified their love for the game and why it meant so much to them. If you don't have an answer, that's fine too. You can just comment something about maybe the deck, maybe if you have some constructive criticism for this old deck of mine, or, you know, or if you just really want to suggest what I should do next, then you can leave that in the comment section below as well. Also, I know you just sat through a bunch of mushy stuff, but if you could leave a like on this video, that'd really be appreciated. And if you found this video by accident, I am so sorry, but subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. Jesus, how do you even end a video like this? If you have an idea, whether it's related to card games or not, whether it's something that you feel is a good idea because you feel like you know a lot about a subject and you just feel like nobody's really listening to you on it, or if it's just something that not a lot of people have said before and you're worried that it just might be a stupid idea, maybe it's not a stupid idea. Maybe it's a Wither deck. Have a good night, everyone.